وَمَن يُسْلِمْ وَجْهَهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ, and whoever submits his face to Allah. Whoever submits his face to who? Allah. The word that people have invented is what? Taqleed. And the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives is yuslim. Aslama, yuslimu, Islam, which is to submit. Submit how? Willingly. And submit to who? Over here? Ilallah, to Allah. You see, aslama, yuslimu, Islam, what is it? To submit in a way that whatever is said, you do it. Whatever is commanded, you follow. Whatever is instructed, you do it. Okay? And remember, Muslim is used for a camel that has submitted to who? To the master. This is the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used. Muslim, yuslim, aslama, yuslimu, Islam, to submit. And when a person submits in this way, what do we see? Seen lam mim also gives us the meaning of being safe, being secure, being sound. So when a person submits to Allah, then he is safe. So وَمَن يُسْلِمْ وَجْهَهُ, whoever submits his face, ilallah. Now over here the face is mentioned. But by mentioning part of the body, the entire is meant. And out of the entire body, what is mentioned over here? Face in particular. Why? Because the face is where a person's dignity is. Isn't it? And the face is where a person's senses are. You see with your eyes, and your eyes are where? On your wajh. Right? You speak with your mouth, and your mouth is where? On your wajh. You listen with your ears, and your ears are on the sides of your wajh. At the top is what? Your forehead, and behind that is your brain with which you think. So وَمَن يُسْلِمْ وَجْهَهُ, meaning whoever submits his entire being ilallah, to Allah. We are not being told to submit our entire being to our forefathers, to other people. But we are told to submit our entire being to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Why to Him? And not anybody else. Because Allah is the Khaliq and He is the Mun'im. If you look in the previous ayat, what do we see? That Allah is the one who has subjected everything for you. أَسْبَغَ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَهُ ظَاهِرَةً وَبَاطِنَةً. So who deserves that you should submit to Him? Someone who has given you nothing, or someone who has given you everything? The one who has given you everything. Someone who has given you only a little bit, or someone who has given you abundant blessings? The one who has given you more. Because the one whose favor is more, his ihsan is more, his haqq is more. So وَمَن يُسْلِمْ وَجْهَهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ, the one who submits his face to Allah. وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ, while he is a doer of good. Now the question is, what does it mean by submitting your face to Allah? Practically, what does it mean by submitting your face to Allah? Obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That whoever submits his face to Allah, meaning whoever obeys Him. Obeys Him when? When he feels like it? When? All the time. In every situation. With regards to every command. With regards to every prohibition. This is what it means by submitting. Truly submitting your face. And also, yuslim wajhahu, submitting your face. What else does it mean? Acts of obedience, which is part of obedience to Allah. Anything else that you can think of? Okay, staying away from Allah's displeasure. Whether you understand or not, obey, listen. Okay? Yes, to be content with the decree of Allah. Tafweed, to give up one's matters to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To hand over one's matters to who? Allah. That a person has submitted to Allah's decisions of qada and qadr. He hands over all of his affairs to Allah and submits to His decree. That whatever my master wants for me, whatever He does to me, whatever He does for me, I accept it. This is what it means by acceptance, right? Whatever is said, whatever is commanded, whatever comes my way, I accept it. Yuslim wajhahu ilallah. The one who has submitted his face to Allah. وَهُوَ مُحْسِن. While he is a muhsin. And remember that submitting one's face to Allah also includes sincerity. Sincerity. That a person does everything for whose sake? Only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I've given you 3 meanings. What are they? First of all, obedience. Secondly, accepting the decree of Allah. Not questioning it. Not getting angry about it. Not saying why me and why this and why not that. And thirdly, sincerity. That whatever a person does, he does it with ikhlas. Only for his sake. Because he has submitted his face to who? Only Allah. Like we learn in Surah Al-An'am, ayah 79, that إِنِّي وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. That indeed I have turned my face. وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِي. I have turned my face toward who? The one who created the heavens and the earth. Inclining toward truth, and I am not of those who associate others with him. That a person, whenever he does something, he does it with sincerity for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Only you, none but you. So وَمَنْ يُسْلِمْ وَجْهُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ. So it's not just that submission is required, but along with submission, what else is required? Ihsan. And what does it mean by ihsan? To do more than what is obligatory. Like for example, it's your obligation to be good towards your husband. And how do you do that? Like for example, you cook food for him. Okay? And making the dessert, for instance, is not something that's mandatory. As long as there's food on the table, okay. So if one day you put in the extra effort to prepare dessert, that's what? Ihsan. Right? He told you, could you please do my laundry? You know that he irons his clothes himself, but you also iron them. That is what? Ihsan. Okay? So, ihsan is what? To do more than what is obligatory. And it's also that when a person does something, how does he do it? Properly. With beauty. He does it as it should be done in a beautiful manner. Because something is beautiful when it is complete, not when it's incomplete. So, one is that you prepare the food, you leave it on the stove and you say, okay, go pour it yourself. And the other is that you without much israf or without extravagance, what do? You set the table nicely so that it's convenient, it's easy. Okay? So this is what? It will add beauty to what you've done. This is what? Ihsan. And muhsin is also one who does hasana. Muhsin, muf'il, ism fa'il. And avoid sayyi'ah. So, وَهُوَ muhsin. That this person, he has first of all submitted his face entirely to Allah, so he obeys Him. He does whatever he does with sincerity, and his acts of worship, they're at the level of ihsan. Whatever he does it with beauty. In his dealings with people, also he is a muhsin. He gives more than the right. So ihsan is what? It is his lifestyle. وَهُوَ muhsin. فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى. Then this person, in fact, he has grasped the most trustworthy handhold. And when a person is holding a handhold that is extremely strong, that is reliable, will he ever fall? Will he ever fall? He will not fall. So this person has become consistent. He has steadfastness. Who? The person who submits to Allah, and he does ihsan as well. فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ. Istamsaka, mim sin kaf, and gives the meaning of holding on to something. But istimsak, istif'al, istimsak, this is with mubalagha. To hold on to something and not let go of it at all. It shows mubalagha in holding on, in tamassuk. So he has held on to bil-urwa. And urwa, ayn ra waw, is everything that a person holds on to. And then he hangs from it. So just imagine you're in a bus and there's no place to sit, and you know how they have those handles up on those rods? So you hold on to one of those handles and you don't let go of it. So let's say if the bus is turning or if it's moving a lot and you are about to fall, what will give you support? That handhold, right? At moments, at certain times, you'll be as if hanging on to it, right? You will lose your balance, but what will give you support? That handle. So urwa is a handle, a support. And al-wusqa, this is a sifa of urwa. And wusqa, waw, sa, qaf, this is feminine of awthaq. You see, always check the structure. What's the structure of wusqa? Fu'la and fu'la, kubra, uliya, husna, and what's the masculine of that? Ahsan, akbar, right? So similarly, wusqa, feminine of awthaq. Right? And awthaq is what? Af'alu tafdeel. So what is awthaq? Is it just strong? Just strong? Very strong. Extremely strong. Extremely secure. Extremely firm. Very firm. This is what wusqa is. So he's holding on to a handle that is the firmest handle. Firmest handle. The strongest handle, which is in no danger of getting cut off. It is dependable. It is reliable. You will not have any fear that it's going to break. Sometimes you're holding on to a handle like that, and sometimes you really feel that it's going to break. It's going to snap off. Isn't it? Why? When it's made of rubber, when it's made of plastic, or if it's moving too much, or you see that it's very wobbly, then what happens? As you're holding on to it, you become so frightened, you become so fearful that what if I fall? And some people, what do? They don't hold on to it anymore, they go and hold on to a pole or something. They cannot rely on it. But al-urwatul wusqa, such a strong handhold, that is so dependable that it will never break, it will never get cracked, it will never let you fall. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ, and to Allah is the outcome of all matters. The ultimate return for decision and judgment of all matters is to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will make the final decision for every single matter. What do we see in this ayah? What's the message in this ayah? What are we being taught? The way to steadfastness. How does a person become steadfast? How is it that he develops azm? Yesterday when we were learning about إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ, that is of those matters for which determination is required. Many of you must have thought about this, that how do you develop determination? How do you develop azm? Isn't it? Like for example, you start something good. You start coming to class, you start doing your work, and what happens all of a sudden? You get distracted by one thing. You get discouraged because of another thing. And eventually like, okay, forget it. I can't do this anymore. I can't handle this. Many times it happens, right? This is why azm is required. What do we see over here? That what is it that will provide you urwatul wusqa? Such a firm handhold that will never let you fall. That will never let you give up. That will never let you stop. Al-urwatul wusqa is basically referring to iman over here. Okay? This is basically, in the context, it's referring to iman. Because life is full of jerks and jolts and constant difficulties and convulsions. So what is it that will give you the ability to stay firm when you're holding on to something? Isn't it? And this, what you're holding on to, is what? Iman. How will you develop that? How? Yuslim wajhahu ila Allah wa huwa muhsin. The one who submits his face entirely to Allah, and he also does ihsan. This will give a person strong iman, and strong iman will give a person azm to do anything and everything, no matter what difficulty he faces, no matter what challenge he faces. Do you understand? Do you understand? Because many times what happens? We start and we stop. What's the problem? Is it that we don't believe? Is it? We do believe. But what is it that makes us weak? Lack of determination. So what is it that gives a person determination? When he has the certainty that what I'm doing is right, what I'm doing is important. And when he has submitted himself to Allah, when he accepts the qadr of Allah. Remember one of the meanings of Yuslim? He accepts the decree of Allah. Okay, this is what Allah has sent my way, I accept it. He accepts it, he bears with it, and he continues. He doesn't give up. In Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 256, we learn, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا. That whoever disbelieves in Taghut and believes in Allah, then that person has grasped the most trustworthy handhold with no break in it. That Allah supports that person then. You understand? That a person has this yaqeen that Allah will support me. No matter what difficulty I'm going through, Allah will support me. This is why if you look at those ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 256, Ayatul Kursi is also mentioned over there. And what do we see in Ayatul Kursi? That لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ. Allah is my support, He is my helper, He will aid me, He never sleeps, He never gets tired. So what do we see? That in order to develop steadfastness, in order to develop firmness, two things are required. That first of all, a person must become sincere on the inside, and he must become a muhsin outwardly. Two things are required. Sincerity on the inside, submission on the inside, and ihsan on the outside. That whatever comes his way from Allah, he accepts. And whatever opportunity he finds, he does good. Wherever he goes, to everybody, in any place, at any time, any opportunity to do good. And what is it that will give a person the ability to avail these opportunities? The sincerity on the inside. Isn't it? When you want to do something for Allah, then no matter how people are, no matter what difficulty you face, no matter how rude someone is, you will keep doing what you have to do. So, sincerity on the inside and ihsan on the outside. These are two things that lead to constancy, that lead to steadfastness. And the first thing is submitting to Allah. If you think about it, every single person, he has directed his face towards something or the other. Isn't it so? Every single person. He has something that is the center of his life. That no matter where he is, what is in front of him? Whatever the center of his life is. Wherever he goes, what does he take along with him? Whatever is important to him, whatever is the center of his life. Even if he's extremely busy, what's on his mind? Whatever is the center of his life. Isn't it? Like for some people, the center of their life is, let's say their iPod. Now, whether they're going into the washroom, or they're sitting at the dinner table, or they're on the bus, or they're walking, or they're sitting in class, what do they have with them? What do they have it? iPod, right? That's the center of their life. For some other people, their work is extremely important to them. Their email is extremely important to them. Which is why what happens? Constantly they're getting their work email on their phone. After every 15 minutes, they have this automatic thing which checks their email for them. And if there's new email, their phone will buzz. And what will happen? They will go check their email immediately. Right? No matter where they are, at a wedding, at a restaurant, at a friend's house, at their parents', they're mowing their backyard. Anything that they're doing, what are they concerned about? Their phone, their email. Women are cooking in the kitchen, what will they check? Their email. Right? They will check their phones. So, every person has some center of life that they are facing constantly. Now, one is that a person makes the center of his life something of this dunya. Something of this dunya. Some person, could be their children, could be a friend, could be the one whom they love. They're always thinking about them, daydreaming about them, thinking about what they said, what they did, never forgetting about them. And the other is that a person makes the center of his life who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a person makes the center of his life Allah, then what does it mean? That whether he is doing something, he will think about who? Allah. Any action that he is doing, he will want to do it for whose sake? Allah. Everything that he is doing, he will do it according to whose instructions? Allah. Right? And whatever he is doing, who will he remember? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any difficulty, any challenge, who will he turn to? Allah. Who is the first one that will come to his mind? Allah. Now when a person thinks like this, will he ever stop? Will he ever stop doing what he's doing? Impossible. He will not stop. Because no challenge then seems impossible. No hurdle seems impossible. Because he's not relying on himself. At that time, who does he rely on? Allah. He knows that Allah is there. He will make me do it. He doesn't think about his own intellect. He doesn't think about his own ability. Who does he rely on? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a person relies on Allah this way, then he will never stop. Of course, that before submission even comes what? Ilm, ma'rifah. That how can a person submit to Allah unless and until he knows about Him? So, knowledge comes first, which is why we see that in the previous ayat, the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were being mentioned, so that we have a better understanding and as a result, a stronger motivation to submit to Him. Okay, we'll listen to the recitation, then we'll continue. So if you see over here, that when a person, he directs his face to Allah, any action that he's doing, whether it is in the form of doing some work, or it is in the form of doing ihsan towards people, then who is he thinking about? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because sometimes what happens, we are doing good towards someone, they say one rude thing to us, and what do we think? Never again. Never again. Was that action sincere? It wasn't sincere. Because if a person was doing it with sincerity for the sake of Allah, then no matter how the other responded, you would still do it. Right? You would still be good. You would still do what you're supposed to do. Many times it happens that we're doing some work, one person is harsh towards us, we say, okay, I'm not going again. But the thing is that if you are doing it for the sake of Allah, then no matter what difficulties you face, you will do your work. You will do your work. Many times people get together and they start talking about why they don't do something. And why don't they do it? Because so-and-so person said that to them. And so-and-so person did that. This is an evidence of what? Insincerity. Because the one who is sincere, he is doing what he's doing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And regardless of what happens in return, he does it. He does what is important to him. And this is what develops consistency in his actions. This is what makes him steadfast. This is what gives him sabat. Otherwise a person cannot accomplish anything in this dunya. So فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى. Finally at the end what has been said? وَإِلَى اللَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. And to Allah is the outcome of all matters. That everything is going to Allah. Every affair is going to be taken to Allah for decision, for judgment. If I am sincere, why should I worry about the rudeness of the other person? If I am sincere, why should I worry about how the other person did not fulfill their responsibility, their work? If I am sincere, then I don't need to worry. Then when a person works like this, then that will bring consistency in his actions. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. And when a person works like this, then no matter what happens, whether he is sick or he is healthy, whether he's traveling, whatever circumstances he's in, his direction is towards who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why he will do his work. Sincerity is the key. Sincerity is the key. And if a person lacks sincerity, then what will happen? Even if the whole world is trying to motivate you, you will not be able to do your work. You will not move an inch. Even if 1,000 incentives are given to you, you will not do it. What will give you the motivation? Sincerity. And nothing other than sincerity can give you this motivation. And if you look at it, basically these ayat are talking about tawheed, about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is that a person turns to Allah, only to Allah, yuslim wajhahu ila Allah. And the other is that a person turns towards something else. He makes someone else the purpose of his life, something else the objective of his life, whether it's a computer or an iPod or something or the other. Then when a person relies on other things, then can they help him? Can they? They fail him. So many times it happens that we think, oh, this person can help me, that person can help me, this will come in use, but they don't come in use. They fail you every time. Most of the time at least. This is why we learn in Surah Al-Hajj, ayah 31, that a person who commits shirk, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَكَأَنَّمَا خَرَّ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَتَخْطَفُهُ الطَّيْرُ أَوْ تَهْوِي بِهِ الرِّيحُ فِي مَكَانٍ سَحِيقٍ. That a person who does shirk, it is as though he has fallen from the sky and he was snatched by the birds, or the wind carried him down into a remote place. One is that a person does something sincerely for Allah's sake. He is holding on to what? Al-urwatul wusqa, which will never crack, never break. And the other is that a person relies on something else other than Allah. And when that happens, then there's no thabat, no consistency, no steadfastness. It's as though a person has fallen. And he will end up as a failure. Many times it happens with us that when we start something, we tell ourselves, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah. And what happens? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us. Right? You claim that you're doing something for the sake of Allah. You think Allah will not test you? Of course He will. So what happens? One person says something extremely harsh. The other person says, don't do this anymore. The other person says, you're wasting your time. Then you want to go, but you're tired, you're sick, and you have to travel, and people are pulling you towards something else. Now, if you said you were sincere, Allah has tested you. And if you are really sincere, then what will happen throughout these difficulties? You will keep doing what you are supposed to do. And the fact that you don't stop, that is an evidence of your sincerity. And if you stop, if you get derailed by other things, then that is an evidence of insincerity. So it's very easy to start with sincerity, but it's challenging to end with sincerity. This is why the beginning is important and the ending is also important. Urwatul Wusqa, it refers to Iman. And Iman, and then Yuslim Wajhahu ilallah, Islam, and then Ihsan, Iman, Islam, Ihsan. All these three things, what do they lead to? Strengthening one another. Isn't it so? They strengthen one another. The stronger a person's Iman, the stronger his submission. The more his submission, the more Ihsan in his actions. The more Ihsan in his actions, it will increase his Iman even more. Isn't it so? When you pray with khushu', doesn't that strengthen your Iman? Doesn't that increase your Iman? Of course it does. So one thing leads to another. This is why al-urwatul wusqa, it doesn't come to a stop then. Then a person keeps rolling. He doesn't stop. He keeps going. When a person has strong yaqeen, strong faith, then nothing seems difficult to him. Because he's not relying on himself. Who's he relying on? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum. We learn in Surah At-Tawbah, if Allah Ta'ala say, Hasbi Allahu la ilaha illa huwa alayhi tawakkaltu wa huwa rabbul arshil azim. If we feel like we are weak or anything, we have to say this dua. Inshallah, Allah will give us energy.
Exactly. He will give us strength. He will give us energy. And this is why it's recommended to say this 7 times in the morning and 7 times in the evening. That Hasbi Allahu. Allah is sufficient for me. Alayhi tawakkaltu. Upon Him I trust. So, when a person relies on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He is sufficient for him. And this gives him the ability to continue regardless of what difficulty he's facing. And I'm emphasizing this point a lot because many times we start a lot of things, but we don't continue. We don't. We go sign up somewhere to volunteer, and then when it comes to doing the work, we don't show up. Where were you? I got busy in something. We make a promise we're going to come every single day to school, but what happens? One day something happens, the other day another thing happens, and then we don't end up coming to school. We forget that that is our priority. I'm not saying other things are unimportant. They may be important. They may be necessary. But something that you have committed to, something that you have said you're going to do, you made a promise, what will enable you to do it? Inner strength. And how will that come? With Iman, with Ihsan, with Islam. That will give you inner strength. And no matter what the challenge, you'll do it. You know, it's like when you have to do something, then you do it anyway. Isn't it? We'll listen to the recitation.